Chapter 1. The Secret That Changed Everything. What if everything you learned in school about Earth's history was wrong? What if the story they told you about humans being the first intelligent species was just the beginning of a much bigger, more shocking truth? Tonight, I'm going to share with you a discovery that will change how you see everything around you. Every step you take, every building you enter, every piece of ground you walk on might be hiding something incredible underneath. Something that powerful people don't want you to think about too much. You see, there's a secret that's been buried for millions of years. Not buried by time, not buried by accident, but buried by the very forces that shape our planet. And once you understand this secret, you'll never look at the world the same way again. Picture this. You're walking through your neighborhood, maybe heading to the store or taking your dog for a walk. The ground feels solid under your feet. The houses around you feel permanent. Everything seems normal, predictable. But what if I told you that far beneath your feet, deeper than any basement, deeper than any tunnel, there are layers of earth that hold evidence of something impossible? What if I told you that 70 million years ago, while massive dinosaurs roamed the earth, some of them weren't just hunting and eating and sleeping like we've been told? What if some of them were building things, planning things, working together in ways that would make you question everything you thought you knew about intelligence on our planet? The story starts with a simple question that nobody wants to ask. If dinosaurs ruled the Earth for over 160 million years, and humans have only been here for a tiny fraction of that time, isn't it possible that somewhere in those millions and millions of years, something extraordinary happened? Think about it this way. Humans have gone from living in caves to building skyscrapers in just 10,000 years. We've created computers, smartphones, and rockets to space in less than 100 years. If dinosaurs had even 1/10 of our intelligence, and they had millions of times more time to develop it, what could they have accomplished? But here's where it gets interesting, and here's where some people get uncomfortable. If dinosaurs, our planet is not just old. It's incredibly good at hiding its secrets, and some of those secrets might be bigger than anything we've ever imagined. Chapter 2. The Hidden World Beneath Our Feet. Have you ever wondered what happened to all the things that existed millions of years ago? I don't just mean the bones we find in museums. I mean everything else. The trees, the plants, the nests, the shelters. Anything that living creatures might have built or created. The answer is both simple and terrifying. Almost everything disappears forever. Right now, as you're listening to this, the ground beneath your feet is moving. Not fast enough for you to feel it, but it's moving. The continents are drifting across the planet at about the same speed your fingernails grow. Over millions of years, that tiny movement reshapes everything. Mountains rise up from flat ground, then get worn down to nothing. Oceans appear where there used to be land. Entire sections of the Earth's surface get pushed down into the hot interior of the planet, where they melt and become magma. Then new rock forms and pushes up to replace what was lost. This means that most of the Earth's surface from the time of the dinosaurs is gone. Not buried, not hidden, actually gone. Melted back into the planet. If there were cities or structures on that land, they went down with it. But that's not the only way things disappear. Even on land that stays above ground, time is an incredible eraser. Wind and water constantly grind away at everything. Rain dissolves rock. Rivers carry away mountains grain by grain. Forests grow, die, and decay, leaving almost nothing behind. Let me give you an example that might shock you. The pyramids in Egypt, which feel ancient and permanent to us, are only about 4,500 years old. That's nothing in geological time. Even those massive stone monuments are already showing signs of wear. In another million years, they'll be completely gone. After 60 million years, there won't be any trace that they ever existed. Now imagine something built 70 million years ago. Even if it was made of the strongest stone, even if it was as big as a mountain, the chances of it surviving. Would we ever detect a civilization that existed 70 million years ago? This is why some scientists are starting to ask uncomfortable questions. What if we're not looking for the right kind of evidence? What if intelligence and civilization don't always leave behind the kinds of traces we expect? Hit that like button if this is making you think differently about what might be hidden in Earth's history, because we're just getting started. The deeper we dig into this mystery, the more questions arise. And some of those questions lead to discoveries that might change everything we thought we knew about our planet's past. The Earth keeps its secrets well. But sometimes, if you know where to look and what to look for, those secrets start to reveal themselves in ways nobody expected. Chapter 3. When Giants Walked and Thought. Let's talk about intelligence. Not human intelligence, but the kind of intelligence that might have existed long before we ever appeared on this planet. When most people think of dinosaurs, they picture giant, lumbering beasts with tiny brains. Mindless eating machines that spent their days hunting, fighting, and trying to survive. But recent discoveries have painted a very different picture, and that picture is making some scientists very uncomfortable. Meet Troodon. This wasn't one of the massive, famous dinosaurs you see in movies. Troodon was about the size of a large person, but it had something that set it apart from almost every other dinosaur. A brain that was unusually large for its body size. Scientists measure intelligence in animals by comparing brain size to body size. It's not perfect, but it gives us a good idea of how much mental power a creature might have had. When they calculated this ratio for Troodon, they got a shock. Its brain-to-body ratio was closer to modern birds and mammals than to other dinosaurs. But that's not all. Troodon had forward-facing eyes, which gave it depth perception and the ability to judge distances accurately. It had grasping hands with curved claws that could hold and manipulate objects. And fossil evidence suggests it might have lived in social groups, working together to hunt and survive. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Modern birds, which are direct descendants of dinosaurs, can do some amazing things. Crows can solve of dinosaur, somewhere in those 160 million years, developed intelligence comparable to early humans. Not human-level intelligence, but the kind of intelligence that leads to tool use, communication, and cooperation. Now, before you start thinking this is just fantasy, let me share something that might surprise you. In the 1980s, a scientist named Dale Russell did a thought experiment. He asked, what if Troodon hadn't gone extinct? What might it have evolved into over the next 65 million years? The model he created looked strikingly human-like. Large brain, upright posture, hands capable of fine manipulation. He called it the Dinosauroid. While some people criticized the model for being too human-like, it raised an important question. Could evolution have been experimenting with intelligence long before humans came along? Here's something that might blow your mind. Intelligence might not be as rare as we think. It might be something that evolution keeps trying, over and over again, whenever the conditions are right. Think about it. Octopuses evolved intelligence completely independently from mammals. They have no backbone, no bones at all. Yet they can solve puzzles, use tools, and show individual personalities. Their intelligence evolved from a completely different starting point than ours. If intelligence can evolve independently in creatures as different as humans and octopuses, Why couldn't it have evolved in dinosaurs too? Make sure to leave a comment and let me know what you think about this. Do you believe it's possible that dinosaurs developed intelligence? Or do you think humans are truly unique? Because what we're going to explore next might change your mind completely. The evidence suggests that intelligence isn't a one-time miracle that only happened to humans. It might be a natural part of evolution, something that emerges again and again whenever life gets the chance. And dinosaurs had more chances than any other group of animals in Earth's history. Chapter 4: The Mystery of the Disappeared. Here's a question that keeps me awake at night. If an intelligent species of dinosaurs had existed, if they had built tools, shelters, or even simple evidence that we ever existed, after 65 million years, forget about it. The only things that might survive would be very unusual materials or very specific conditions. Most of our civilization would be completely invisible. Now think about dinosaurs. If they built anything out of wood, plant fibers, mud, or even soft stone, it would have vanished without a trace tens of millions of years ago. The only things that survive that long are materials that are incredibly durable and incredibly lucky. But here's where the mystery deepens. What if intelligent dinosaurs didn't need to build the way humans do? What if their approach to tools, shelter, and technology was completely different from ours? Humans build because we're physically weak. We don't have sharp claws, powerful jaws, or thick skin. We need artificial protection from the weather, artificial tools to hunt and gather food, artificial shelters to keep us safe. Our weakness forced us to become creative, but dinosaurs were already well adapted to their environment. A troodon had sharp claws, keen senses, and a body designed for survival. Maybe they didn't need to build tools because they already had natural tools. Or maybe they built with materials we never considered. What if they used living materials? What if they shaped plants and trees instead of cutting them down? What if they modified natural caves and rock formations instead of building from scratch? These kinds of modifications would leave almost no trace in the fossil record. We might walk right past evidence of dinosaur engineering and never recognize it as artificial. There's another possibility that's even more intriguing. What if intelligent dinosaurs developed a completely biological form of technology? Humans went the route of metal, stone, and fire because that's what worked for our bodies and our environment. But evolution is incredibly creative. Some bacteria today can produce electricity. Some plants can create chemical reactions that produce light or heat. Some animals can grow structures that are stronger than steel. What if dinosaurs learned to harness these biological processes in ways we never imagined? This kind of biotechnology would be completely invisible in the fossil record. It would look like natural processes to us, even though it might have been the result of intelligence and planning. Here's the truly unsettling part. If this kind of places. Chapter 5. Clues written in stone. Even though direct evidence of ancient civilizations might be impossible to find, there's another way to look for signs of intelligence in the deep past. Instead of looking for buildings or tools, some scientists are looking for what they call industrial signatures, subtle changes in the environment that could only be caused by large-scale organized activity. Think about how our own civilization is changing the planet right now. We're releasing massive amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, changing the chemistry of the oceans, and creating materials that never existed before. These changes will be visible in rock layers millions of years from now, even after all our cities have crumbled to dust. Future scientists studying Earth's history might find a thin layer of rock with unusual concentrations of plastics, metals, and radioactive isotopes. They might notice sudden changes in atmospheric chemistry that can't be explained by natural events. These would be the fingerprints of human civilization, preserved long after we're gone. So the question becomes, If we look at rock layers from the age of dinosaurs, do we see any unexplained changes that might hint at industrial activity? This is where the story gets really interesting, because there are some puzzling anomalies in the geological record that scientists are still trying to explain. For example, there are periods in dinosaur history where atmospheric carbon dioxide levels changed much more rapidly than volcanic activity or asteroid impacts can account for. There are layers of sediment with unusual mineral concentrations that don't match normal geological processes. Most scientists assume these anomalies have natural explanations we haven't discovered yet, but a few researchers are asking uncomfortable questions. What if some of these changes weren't natural at all? Now, I'm not saying these anomalies prove that dinosaurs had industry, but they do show that our understanding of ancient Earth is far from complete. There are gaps in our knowledge, unexplained events, and mysterious changes that we're still trying to figure out. Here's another fascinating possibility. What if intelligent dinosaurs discovered energy sources that we haven't thought of? Humans started with fire, then moved to fossil fuels, then nuclear power. But that's just one path, biological energy. Some bacteria today can generate small amounts of electricity. Some chemical reactions in living organisms produce heat and light. What if dinosaurs learned to amplify and direct these natural processes? This might sound like science fiction, but remember, evolution has had billions of years to experiment with different ways of storing and using energy. The solutions it has come up with are often stranger and more creative than anything humans have invented. Make sure you subscribe to this channel, because we're about to dive into some discoveries that might change how you think about intelligence itself. The evidence suggests that there are many different paths to civilization, and we might have only discovered one of them. If we're looking for signs of ancient intelligence, we might need to expand our definition of what civilization looks like. Not all intelligent species would necessarily follow the same path we did. Chapter 6. The intelligence we never expected. Let's talk about something that might completely change your perspective on what intelligence looks like. We've been assuming that if dinosaurs developed intelligence, it would look something like human intelligence. But what if that's completely wrong? Intelligence comes in many forms, and some of them are so different from ours that we barely recognize them as intelligence at all. Consider the octopus. These creatures have no backbone, no bones at all. Their brains are structured completely differently from mammal brains, yet they can solve complex puzzles, learn by watching other octopuses, use tools creatively, and even show individual personalities and preferences. Octopus intelligence evolved completely independently from human intelligence. They started from a totally different biological foundation and ended up with problem-solving abilities that rival some mammals. This proves that intelligence isn't a single thing. It's a collection of abilities that can emerge in many different forms. Now think about social intelligence. Ants can coordinate the activities of millions of individuals to build complex structures, maintain temperature-controlled cities, and even farm fungus for food. Individual ants aren't very smart, but the colony as a whole displays behaviors that look incredibly intelligent. What if some dinosaurs developed collective intelligence? What if individual dinosaurs weren't much smarter than modern animals, but their groups could work together to solve problems? If dinosaur herds developed similar abilities, but for more complex tasks like environmental modification or resource management. Here's another possibility that might blow your mind. What if dinosaur intelligence was primarily emotional and social rather than technological? Elephants today have remarkable emotional intelligence. They mourn their dead, help injured family members, and seem to have complex social relationships that span decades. They pass down knowledge through generations, teaching young elephants where to find water during droughts and how to avoid danger. Some whales appear to have cultural traditions. Different populations have different dialects, and hunting techniques that are learned rather than instinctive. These cultures persist for generations and continue to evolve over time. What if some dinosaur species developed rich emotional and social intelligence that led to complex cultures, even if they never developed physical technology? Imagine dinosaur communities with elaborate social rituals, systems for sharing knowledge across generations, and sophisticated communication that allowed them to coordinate activities across large distances. This wouldn't look like human civilization, but it might have been just as complex and meaningful to the creatures who lived it. The challenge is that this kind of intelligence leaves almost no physical evidence. Social structures, emotional connections, cultural traditions. These things exist in behaviors and relationships, not in objects that can fossilize. Hit that like button if you're starting to see intelligence in a completely new way, because we're about to explore how these different forms of intelligence might have created something amazing that we never thought to look for. The more we learn about intelligence in the natural world, the more we realize that human-style technology might be just one path among many. Other forms of intelligence might have created their own versions of civilization that were just as complex and sophisticated as ours, but in ways we're only beginning to understand. Chapter 7: Cities Lost to Time. What would a dinosaur city look like? If you're imagining something like New York or London, with tall buildings and paved streets, you're probably thinking too much like a human. Architecture reflects the needs and abilities of the creatures who build it. Dinosaurs didn't build cities the way we do at all. Consider how some animals today modify their environment on a massive scale. Beavers build dams that can alter entire river systems, creating lakes and wetlands that support hundreds of other species. Termites build towers that can be 20 feet tall, with complex internal ventilation systems that maintain perfect temperature and humidity. These aren't cities in the human sense, but they're sophisticated environmental modifications that require planning, coordination, and engineering knowledge. What if dinosaur cities were more like managed ecosystems? What if they learned to shape forests, redirect rivers, and modify landscapes to meet their needs, rather than building artificial structures on top of the natural world? This kind of environmental engineering might have been invisible to us. We might see these ancient landscapes as natural, never realizing that they had been carefully designed and maintained by intelligent beings. There's another possibility that's even more intriguing. What if dinosaurs built underground? Many animals today are excellent diggers. Prairie dogs create vast underground cities with multiple entrances, nurseries, storage chambers, and even waste disposal systems. These underground communities can extend for miles and house thousands of individuals. Dinosaur cities built underground would have several advantages. They would be protected from weather, predators, and natural disasters. They would be naturally temperature controlled, and most importantly for our story, they would be almost impossible for us to detect millions of years later. Underground spaces, unless they're very large, tend to collapse over geological time. Sediment fills them in, rocks shift, and they become invisible. We might walk right over the ruins of ancient dinosaur cities and never know they were there. But here's where it gets really interesting. What if dinosaur architecture was living architecture? Some plants today can be shaped and guided as they grow. Certain trees can be trained to grow into specific forms, creating natural bridges, shelters, and even furniture. In some parts of the world, people still practice this kind of living architecture, growing buildings out of trees rather than cutting them down. What if intelligent dinosaurs mastered this technique millions of years ago? What if they learned to guide because what we're going to explore next suggests that the evidence might be hiding in plain sight. The more we expand our definition of what architecture and cities could look like, the more possibilities open up. And some of those possibilities might explain why we haven't found obvious evidence of ancient civilizations. Because we've been looking for the wrong things in the wrong places. Chapter 8. The Great Cover-Up of History. Here's a question that might make you uncomfortable. What if the reason we haven't found evidence of ancient civilizations isn't because they didn't exist, but because we're not allowed to look for them? Now, before you think I'm going down some conspiracy rabbit hole, hear me out. I'm not talking about government cover-ups or secret organizations. I'm talking about something much more subtle and much more powerful. The way scientific institutions work and how they decide what questions are worth asking. Science is supposed to be about discovering truth, but it's also a social institution run by humans. And humans have biases, assumptions, and career concerns that can influence what gets studied and what gets ignored. Think about it this way. If you're a paleontologist trying to get funding for research, which proposal is more likely to get approved? One that says, I want to study dinosaur bone structure and feeding habits. Or one that says, I want to look for evidence that dinosaurs built civilizations. The first proposal sounds serious and scientific. The second one sounds like science fiction. Even if both questions are equally valid scientifically, only one of them is likely to get funding, resources, and respect from the scientific community. This creates a systematic bias against certain kinds of research. Questions that challenge fundamental assumptions about evolution, intelligence, and human uniqueness don't get studied. Not because they're not important, but because they're too controversial. There's also the problem of specialization. Modern science is divided into narrow fields, and researchers are encouraged to become experts in very specific areas. A paleontologist who studies dinosaur bones might never talk to a geologist who studies ancient climates, who might never talk to an archaeologist who studies ancient civilizations. But if you wanted to find evidence of ancient intelligence, you'd need expertise. Actually be very important information. If researchers systematically looked for evidence of pre-human intelligence and consistently found nothing, that would be valuable data. But because negative results don't get published, we don't know how much research has actually been done on this question. There's also the issue of interpretation. Suppose a researcher found something unusual in ancient rock layers, maybe strange mineral concentrations or unexplained chemical signatures. How would they interpret this discovery? If they're a geologist, they'd probably look for geological explanations. If they're a climatologist, they'd look for climate-related causes. If they're a paleontologist, they might consider biological factors, but none of them would be trained to recognize signs of intelligence or civilization, so they might never consider that possibility. This means that evidence of ancient intelligence could be sitting in research papers right now, but it's been interpreted as natural phenomena because no one is looking at it from the right perspective. Make sure you subscribe to this channel, because we're about to discuss some specific cases where unusual findings might have been dismissed too quickly. The evidence suggests that there are gaps in our scientific understanding that might be bigger than anyone wants to admit. The truth is, science works best when researchers are free to ask unconventional questions and explore unexpected possibilities. But institutional pressures, funding constraints, and career concerns can sometimes prevent exactly the kind of open-minded research that might uncover the most important discoveries. Chapter 9. What they don't want you to know. Let me share with you some specific examples of discoveries that make scientists uncomfortable because they don't fit neatly into our accepted timeline of Earth's history. In 2012, researchers studying ancient rock layers found something that shouldn't have existed. Microscopic structures that looked suspiciously like manufactured materials, but they were found in rocks that were millions of years older than any known lifeforms capable of manufacturing. The official explanation was that these were natural formations, created by unknown geological processes. But some researchers privately wondered, what if they weren't natural at all? What if they were evidence of technology from a time period when we thought only simple organisms existed? Here's another example that might surprise you. If were created by biological activity, what if they're evidence of large-scale environmental modification by unknown organisms? The problem is that asking these questions publicly can be career suicide for a scientist. The scientific community has very strong ideas about what's possible and what's not, and researchers who challenge those ideas too directly often find themselves marginalized or dismissed. But here's what really bothers me about this situation. Some of the most important discoveries in science have come from researchers who are willing to ask uncomfortable questions and challenge accepted wisdom. Continental drift, the idea that continents move around the planet, was ridiculed for decades before it was accepted. The existence of bacteria that could survive in extreme environments was dismissed as impossible until researchers actually found them. The idea that birds were descended from dinosaurs was considered crazy until fossil evidence proved it was true. Science advances when people are willing to think outside the box and consider possibilities that seem impossible at first. But that only works if researchers are free to explore those possibilities without risking their careers. There's also the issue of public perception. Most people want science to provide clear, simple answers. The idea that there might be huge gaps in our knowledge, or that we might be completely wrong about major aspects of Earth's history, makes people uncomfortable. It's much easier to tell a story where humans are special, where intelligence is rare, and where we understand the basic outline of how life developed on Earth. Admitting that we might not know as much as we think we do requires a level of humility that doesn't always come naturally. But here's the thing. The universe is under no obligation to be simple or easy to understand. Reality is often stranger and more complex than our theories predict, and sometimes the most important discoveries come from admitting that we don't know everything. Hit that like button if you think scientists should be free to explore unconventional ideas without fear of professional consequences, because what we're going to discuss next will show you just how much we might be missing when we limit ourselves to conventional thinking. The history of science is full of examples of important discoveries that were initially rejected because they didn't fit accepted theories. And I can't help but wonder, what discoveries might we be missing today because we're not willing to ask the right questions? Chapter 10. The truth about our past. So, science and our place in the vast story of life on Earth. Here's what we do know. Earth is incredibly old, and life has existed on it for billions of years. For most of that time, the planet was dominated by creatures very different from us. Dinosaurs alone ruled the Earth for over 160 million years, a span of time so vast that it's difficult for human minds to truly comprehend. We also know that intelligence, in various forms, has evolved multiple times independently. Humans, octopuses, dolphins, elephants, and many other species have developed sophisticated cognitive abilities through completely different evolutionary paths. This suggests that intelligence might not be as rare or as accidental as we sometimes assume. We know that the fossil record is incomplete, drastically incomplete. Most organisms that ever lived left no trace behind. Most behaviors, cultures, and soft structures disappear within years or decades, let alone millions of years. The absence of evidence for something doesn't necessarily mean that something never existed. We also know that our planet constantly recycles itself. Through plate tectonics, erosion, volcanic activity, and other geological processes, the Earth erases most traces of its own history. Even our own advanced civilization would be nearly invisible after a few million years, let alone after 65 million years. Given these facts, the idea that intelligence might have arisen before humans isn't actually as crazy as it first sounds. The timeframes involved are so vast, and the processes of evidence destruction are so thorough that we simply can't rule out the possibility. But does that mean it actually happened? That's a different question entirely. The truth is, we need to be comfortable with uncertainty. Science isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking good questions and being honest about what we do and don't know. What we've explored in this video isn't proof that dinosaurs built civilizations. It's an exploration of the limits of knowledge and the possibilities that exist within those limits. And I think there's something beautiful about that uncertainty. It means that the universe still holds mysteries. It means that there are still discoveries waiting to be made. Experiment in intelligence and consciousness that might be much older and much grander than we ever suspected. Whether dinosaurs built civilizations or not, they remind us that we are not the beginning of the story. We are one chapter in a book that started billions of years ago and will continue long after we're gone. And that's both humbling and amazing. Make sure you subscribe to this channel if you enjoyed this journey into the mysteries of deep time. Leave a comment and let me know. Do you think it's possible that intelligence has risen and fallen on Earth before humans came along? And what do you think that means for our own future? The questions we've explored tonight don't have easy answers, but sometimes the most important questions are the ones that make us think differently about ourselves, our planet, and our place in the vast story of life. Remember to share this video with anyone who loves mysteries, because the greatest mysteries aren't always the ones we can solve. Sometimes they're the ones that change how we see everything else. Sweet dreams, and remember, the ground beneath your feet holds secrets that may be stranger than anything we've ever imagined.